Hello and welcome to episode 180 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. 2 weeks ago, Maz and I started putting together a tier list for Disney's Hollywood Studios. Later in today's episode, the two of us will wrap up that conversation and give our final assessment of all of the attractions in the park. Before that, I'll be talking with Madonna Kaufman from the organization Locks of Love. This spring, after growing my hair for years, I had it cut so that I could donate it to Locks of Love. As many of you who have followed the show for the past 3.5 years know, I always try to promote causes from people trying to make a difference. Of course, we're also doing more and more interesting content. It isn't just theme parks anymore. We're going on hikes, going to baseball games, and learning more about different travel destinations. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. Also, make sure to watch, like, and comment on videos. These things are 100% free, but they really help us grow. Now, let's welcome Madonna Kaufman from Locks of Love. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rick, for having me.
So, I want to ask some really basic questions of you today. I am about to have my hair cut, and I'm going to be donating it to Locks of Love. If somebody wants to sort of follow my lead and do the same, what's the process like?
The process for the hair donor is really very easy. People say, where do I have to go to donate my hair? And we always tell them, go to your hairdresser. Or if you want to have someone at home cut it off, that's fine. But you're going to need a style after you cut it. It might look a little funny if you just chop it off. But the hair needs to be clean and dry, and it needs to be in a ponytail or a braid. That's really important because the hair shaft has microscopic barbs on it. So we need to know the direction the hair is growing from top to bottom so that when it's implanted into a prosthesis for a recipient, the hair has to be implanted in the right direction. Because of those microscopic barbs, if it's implanted wrong, it could cause a knot that could never be combed out. So people say, gee, why do you need to know the direction and why does it have to be in a ponytail? So we don't lose it by putting it in the wrong direction and causing knots that could only be cut out. So clean and dry in a ponytail or a braid, and the part that you send to Locks of Love should be at least 10 inches long. And that's because the hairpiece that we made is not a wig, it's a prosthesis. It's made from a mold of every recipient's head so that it fits them and only them. And 2 inches of each hair is implanted into a silicone base. So suddenly a 10-inch donation becomes an 8-inch donation. And yes, we do have male recipients, but most of the girls want as long a hair as possible. So because we lose 2 inches in the production, it needs to be at least 10 inches. And also because the prostheses are made by hand, short hair is physically difficult to hold when they're implanting it into the prosthesis. So that goes in a bag, usually a Ziploc bag, and any mailing envelope, doesn't have to be a manila envelope, any envelope you've got, and then you mail it off to Locks of Love with your name and address so that we can send you a thank you card.
And when you talk about the recipients and what they want, I just want to get into the recipients a little bit because how big of a deal is this when you have somebody who didn't want to lose their hair and now all of a sudden they can at least have this one little sense of normalcy where maybe they can feel like they have this hair and they can walk out of the house and not feel like they're dealing with whatever illness caused them to lose their hair?
Well, it's a good question. It's a bigger deal than anyone can ever imagine until it happens to you. Most of these children are diagnosed with alopecia in their younger years, the developmental years, where no kid wants to be different. They want to wear the same jeans, they want to have the same backpack. They don't want to stand out and be the object of attention. So when they get their prosthesis, they're suddenly kids are super resilient, unlike adults. We get stuck in our ways and we don't change so easily. But some of these kids have been homeschooled because they were bullied at school, or because they weren't comfortable going to school. They didn't even go to the movies or the mall. And once they get their prosthesis, these kids are back in the game. They're on the gymnastics team, the football team, and they really got their childhood back. So it's a big, big deal, more than you could imagine. And to hair donors out there like yourselves, you're making an amazing change in the lives of these kids and their families. So thank you, and thank you to all of those that follow your lead.
Well, thank you for that. Now, you mentioned you can just go to your regular barber, your regular hairstylist. Do you find that a lot of these hairstylists know the process, or is it something that I'm going to have to explain when I get there?
I would say 9 out of 10 hairstylists are so familiar with Locks of Love that they know the process. But it's really easy to log on our website. It's a step-by-step process. You can familiarize yourself. You can print it out and take it to your hairdresser. Super easy. The main thing, the biggest thing to us is it has to be bound in that ponytail or braid. And we recommend that once you go to the hairdresser and get it cut, bring it home and mail it yourself rather than leaving it for the salon, because some salons will say, oh, we send hair to Locks of Love, but they might put it aside and not send it for a month or 2 months, which is going to delay your donation and delay your thank you card. But just to be sure, why not send it yourself? It's a big thing that you did. You spent the time and the energy and the patience to grow out your hair. Just that one final step of mailing it yourselves will ensure that we got it and it's going to the best possible use.
And if for some reason you can't use the hair for these kids that we mentioned earlier, you still can get some use out of it. Like, let's say you make a mistake in the braid process, or I think a big one would probably be if any of us are denying the fact that we have gray in our hair, for example. You still can find some use for it, correct?
Absolutely. The biggest issue, quite frankly, that we have is people get anxious and they don't quite have 10 inches and they cut it anyway. If we have the opportunity to sell short hair to, for instance, there's been a doll maker somewhere that for years we've been able to take very, very short hair that we couldn't use, and this company makes dolls with human hair. That donation is still coming from your heart. We could turn it into a monetary donation, and because the prostheses are made and given to the kids for free, that little bit helps to pay for the production, which Locks of Love pays for. And really important for everybody to know is these kids get a new prosthesis every 2 years until they turn 21. So once a lot of people are repeat hair donors, especially younger people that don't have that gray you're mentioning, their hair grows really fast, and it's something they might do throughout their childhood into high school. They'll send a donation every 2 years, every 3 years. It gets put to really good use because our recipients get 5, 6, 7 prosthesis as part of the Locks of Love family up until the age of 21.
And then what is the process if somebody has a recipient that they want to put in contact with Locks of Love?
That's our biggest ask for people like you that are spreading the word about Locks of Love, is that you tell someone that might need our help to nominate a child or let them know. You can go to locksoflove.org, O-R-G, nominate a child. There's an application on there. It tells the family or whomever is nominating the child exactly what information we need. It's It's very basic. There's no wait list. As soon as we get all the information, we get the manufacturing process started and we get those kids what the help that they need as soon as possible. So the website has all the information about applying for a hairpiece and also about nominating a child.
Excellent. You really precisely answered all of my questions. I think I expected this to take even a little bit longer, but thank you so much for joining us because I do think you answered a lot of questions. If anybody wants to be a part of this, what is the website?
Locksoflove.org, and it's LOCKSOFLOVE. I'd like to just say one more thing a lot of people don't realize. The difference between a wig and a prosthesis is huge when you're a little kid. A wig has to be held in place by double-sided tape or glue. Our prosthesis, because it's made from silicone, is held on by vacuum. So once it's in place, these kids can swim, they can be on the football team, the gymnastics team, they shower and shampoo their hair just like you and I. Most importantly, it can't be pulled off by a bully on the playground or the school bus, and it can't fall off. Even the child that's wearing it has to break the vacuum at the temples to take it off. So if we just got a wig off a shelf and sent it to a child, that wouldn't give them the confidence they need to do those things like ride a roller coaster or have a sleepover because God forbid it falls off or someone pulls it off. And with our hair replacement system, that can't happen. So it's not something that we have on the shelf. We can't make it until we get an application because it's made to fit only that one child. They get to choose their hair color. The silicone is tinted to match their complexion, so that wherever they part their hair, it looks like scalp as opposed to a wig that has a net. So it's really important to understand the difference because, just giving a wig to a child isn't going to get them back in the game. And that's our goal, to put the smile back on their little faces where it belongs.
What an important note to make before we leave, because I do think that when you were using words like prosthesis, I think a lot of us just, we're like, oh, that must just be their industry term and
Nope.
just move right past it. But it is an important distinction. So thank you so much for letting us know that. Madonna Kaufman, thank you for everything you do, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Rick. We'll look forward to that hair donation.
We aren't wasting any time on this episode of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Right now, let's pick up our conversation with Maz, where we rank all of the attractions at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Thanks for joining us, Maz.
Thanks for having me on.
Star Tours. This is so hard. This is so hard.
Oh, this is tough.
This is a ride where the experience can be different. You can have a better experience one ride, the next ride, maybe you get different scenes that aren't quite as entertaining. It can make you a little sick to your stomach. However, to counteract what we were saying about Rock and Roller Coaster, this now almost never has a wait. This is a walk-on a lot of the time. And I would say the only consistent walk-on in Hollywood Studios. But I still think I'm going to give it a B.
Yeah, I think even B is being a little generous sometimes. I'll give it a B, but I think it's a low B. And again, not that it's a bad ride. I just think that the experience is so varied. Even though you don't really have to wait, you also can get on and be like, well, that was kind of a waste of, 15 minutes. Because it wasn't really a good ride. Or it's one of the rides that comes up the most when people talk about getting motion sick in the parks. That takes away from it a little bit. You're kind of developing a ride that a lot of people have an issue with, and it maybe doesn't have enough of a wow factor to counteract it, like something like Guardians might, where people get motion sickness on that. But the wow factor is so incredible, it still weighs in the ride's favor. With Star Tours, I don't know if there's enough justification for how jerky and oddly moving the ride can be sometimes. I think a low B is where it sits.
I know that Universal is taking 3D out of some of their rides, like Kong Skull Island. They've eliminated the 3D factor, which for that one I think is dumb. But I think for Star Tours, it might be a good idea because it didn't used to be 3D and nobody ever got sick on it. I think if they would drop that to not being 3D, it would actually be a benefit. I might be in the minority there, but I definitely agree that this one is fighting for that B status. And if it wasn't for the fact that it's almost always a walk-on, I probably would have it at a C.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also, taking 3D off that ride is such a good idea. I feel like they should do it.
Because I never get sick on Millennium Falcon Smugglers Run, which is where we will move now. That does not have 3D, but unlike Star Tours, it sticks to the same stinking script every time. I know there are a lot of people who complain about, oh, if a kid is the pilot, then it ruins it. And should we make it so that kids can't be pilots? I think the only thing that I might say is maybe there should be a way you can opt to go to the next car if a kid's a pilot. But either way, sometimes you can be surprised and the kid's actually pretty doggone good because that kid came out of the womb playing video games. This is one of those attractions that drops so fast for me. When it first opened and it's like, you're piloting the Millennium Falcon. This is amazing. And the first time you go punch it, Chewie, and you pull back on the lever and it was amazing. And then the second time you did it, it was okay. And then by the third time you did it, you were like, I can skip this now. And I just never do it anymore. I'm going to be a little controversial. I'm going to say C.
Listen, it may be controversial, but I'm right there with you. I think it's a C list. I also, it's not a must ride for me. I pretty much rarely do it. I only ever do it if someone I'm with wants to do it. I really, really think it was such a misstep not including other missions. There's that whole secret Chewie mode you can unlock, but you have to have everyone in the car doing the exact same thing. And you really have to have a group of 6 to make that happen, which isn't the experience of most park goers, I don't think. So I think putting a couple more different runs in the mix of things would be a big improvement.
And when we do a tier list for Epcot, we're not going to judge Spaceship Earth based on how beautiful Spaceship Earth is when you walk into the park. We're not going to say, oh, it's so photogenic. When we move on to Tower of Terror here, we're not going to talk about that either. Yes, you get to see the Millennium Falcon, and that's one of the coolest parts of Galaxy's Edge. But that's not this ride. I just can't justify putting it any higher.
Yeah, which, okay, I can hear the boos and jeers, but I think sometimes walking around Galaxy's Edge, seeing the Millennium Falcon and seeing Chewie doing some maintenance work on it is more entertaining than riding Smugglers Run, which is not what it should be for a ride that was so hyped up.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you just said. That was perfect. The fact that we have the Millennium Falcon there is why I like Smugglers Run more than the ride itself. Now, it does have single rider, and single rider's great, but if you do single rider, your odds of being a pilot are very, very slim. And this is another one of those attractions like Soarin', where your position in the ride vehicle is way too determinative of your enjoyment level. So, yeah, solid C.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I'm going to get really controversial now. We're going to stay in Galaxy's Edge. Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, which I will say is the best ride in Walt Disney World property. But I'm putting it in the B tier because it just doesn't work enough.
Ooh, that is controversial. I like it. I think that the running issues it has drops it from S to A. So I still think it's an A tier attraction because, when you're in that first room, and spoilers, if you haven't ridden the ride and you're averse to spoilers, I'm going to spoil part of it. When you see Rey come up on the hologram, and then when you get on that transport vehicle, that's all still part of the ride. When you exit the transport vehicle, you're in a different location. You see all those stormtroopers lined up. That's still so incredible and just kind of jaw-dropping. And then you get on the ride, and even if it's not working as it's supposed to, I still think there's enough to marvel at on the ride, and it's still so enjoyable that it does deserve that A tier spot, but it lost its potential S tier best of the park spot because you get B mode Kylo, because the cannons aren't firing, things like that. But I don't think it is on par with some of the other B tier things.
I'm going to sell you on this in 30 seconds. And this is how I'm going to sell you. You're planning a Walt Disney World vacation. It's your one Walt Disney World vacation for 5 years. And you're not adverse to spoilers, so you're doing everything. You want this to be the best vacation you've ever had. So you're watching the YouTube videos, you're listening to podcasts, you get a travel agent, you're doing everything you can so that this is the best vacation ever. You watch a full ride through of Star Wars Rise of the Resistance from December of 2019, and the cannons are moving back and forth, and Kylo's working at full potential, and the cast members who have been told, I'm almost 90% sure, to dial it down on being tough on people. This is not slamming the cast members. I think this is a Disney decision. But you know what this ride is like when it's at its best. And then you wait an hour and a half in the scorching Hollywood studios sun. And then you get on the ride and that's what you get. I want to stick with B tier because I feel like this is a deal breaker ride for some people on their vacations. And the fact that it doesn't work is the biggest knock against Disney right now, in my opinion. People will have a lot of different opinions about, what's wrong with Disney. This ride is the biggest thing because it just doesn't work sometimes. And they charge you for an individual lightning lane if you want the quote unquote fast pass for it. So you're paying like $20 a person or $15 a person or whatever it is to ride this without a long queue. If I paid $80 for my family of 4 to ride this attraction, and it's just Kylo on a video screen in a ship outside the window. Okay, that was more than 30 seconds, but
I think you have a very valid point with the lightning lane argument. I think that if you're paying, $20 a head to ride this and you're not getting the optimal experience, but Disney has said that this is our optimal experience, even though it's not what it should be, I definitely think that there is a very valid disappointment there. I will also say that I have taken people to the parks, both of whom on 2 separate trips, who don't know when they're returning, who are big Star Wars fans, who we waited, in the case of one of them, we waited 3 separate times because it kept breaking down. For this ride, they'd watched ride-throughs of it from when it first opened, all of this. We got B-mode Kylo, we got cannons not moving, and they still talk about how much they loved that ride and it being like the highlight of their trip. And in the case of one of my friends, I remember telling her, like, well, we didn't even really see like the coolest part of it. Like, you still missed a big part of what makes that ride so cool. And she just like straight up didn't care. She was like, that was the best ride we rode the whole trip. And it's been years. And she'll still text me and be like, remember when we rode Rise of the Resistance? I want to do that again. So I think that for a lot of people, there's enough dazzle factor that it still stands out to them as a highlight.
You changed my mind. You changed my grade because I have never been on it with somebody who was going for the first time where they didn't have that jaw drop moment. So even if they did know what was coming and they didn't get the full experience, still when they got into the room with the AT-ATs, when some of those things happened, they still had that awe on their face. You convinced me. We're going to do a lightning round here. Indiana Jones, Muppet Vision 3D. I think Muppet Vision 3D, I'm going to give it a B. I know a lot of people are going to rail against me. This is old. I understand that it was the last thing that Jim Henson ever did, work-related, the last time he ever voiced Kermit. I understand all those things. I don't think they should get rid of it. Most things are B's. But this is a fantastic attraction. I love it, but I just can't give it an A when compared to Slinky Dog Dash. Indiana Jones, I am going to give a C only because I think it is outdated when you compare it to the Bourne Stuntacular over at Universal. And I think even without the Bourne Stuntacular over at Universal, I think it is time to at least update this show. So it's kind of in that Beauty and the Beast range where it's good. I enjoy it, but because it hasn't been updated in such a long time, I never do it. I don't think a lot of people... I mean, listen, if you last came to the parks in 1989, you could have already done this attraction and you might still skip it because it hasn't changed since then. So that's the only reason I have that as a C. Would you agree on those two?
I completely agree on both of those. Everything you said, spot on.
I don't know why I did this tier list like this, knowing how these last two are going to get ranked. I am only going to have Twilight Zone Tower of Terror as an A, but I think Maz is going to try to convince me that it is an S tier attraction, so go at it.
Because it is an S tier attraction. I mean, when you think of Hollywood Studios, truly, now Galaxy's Edge is drawing some people. But when you think Hollywood Studios, people think the Hollywood Tower of Terror. That's become such an iconic aspect of the park that people will have spirited debates that should be the park's icon. That is such an integral part of what the park is. And it is just, I know it is not your ride, but it is fun. For the people who are the audience for the ride, who will be riding it, it is a very, very fun ride. It's the perfect mix of thrilling, but not too thrilling. It's a great alternative to drop rides. And I know that people see it as a drop ride, but it really bounces you more, which makes it more accessible to people. Kids who are younger can tolerate it better because of that bounce aspect, and they're more likely to get scared by the theme than they are the ride itself. And speaking of the theme, it is such a cool theme. When you think about, they created this whole attraction, you walk through this hotel lobby that's got cobwebs and it's dusty and it looks kind of spooky and eerie, and it really sets the tone. And the Twilight Zone is such a cool theme. They'd never build something like that nowadays. It is just such an iconic ride that speaks to a time in Disney Imagineering that I don't think we're in anymore. And I think that it is really a hallmark of Imagineering done so well.
So first of all, I would like to give Maz credit for her little jab at me where she's like, and then you get the little kids who are even scared more by the theme than the drops. So thank you for that.
Was not a jab at you. It was a jab at my sister.
Okay, I'll accept that. No, the only time I have ever ridden this ride, it was with Maz, and I was videotaping myself while doing it, and it is still one of my favorite videos because you can see on my face when I realize it's not going to be as bad as I had built it up in my mind. I still haven't done it a second time, but in my head, I was thinking this was going to be a horrible drop. I said to you, I was worried it was going to give me a heart attack because I was going to be in free fall. And we start dropping, and my face was just like, oh, like whatever. So I do understand what you're saying. I had this written as an S tier already. I knew that it was going to be an S tier. The theming is wonderful. It is, just an iconic part of the park. I will say that the real park icon, however, is the Miss Piggy statue over in the Muppets courtyard. But this is a good second place option. Yeah, it's an S tier. And in all seriousness, I might not do it all the time, but when I did it, it's one of my favorite Disney memories, so I can't knock it. We're not going to put Fantasmic, the Nighttime Spectacular, on the tier list, but while I add up our tiers, why don't you just tell everybody why they need to make sure to check out that attraction?
If Fantasmic were to be on the tier list, it would be an S tier. So let's start with that. It is such an exciting nighttime spectacular. You've been walking around Hollywood Studios all day. Maybe you've been park hopping, so your feet are tired. You want to go sit down. Go sit down for Fantasmic. It's one of the few nighttime shows that you actually get to sit the whole time you watch it, which is fantastic on its own. And then you have this great story with Mickey battling these villains and these different characters coming out. They recently revamped it, so, everything's a little bit brighter, everything's a little bit plussed up. You get some amazing effects happening on the water mist and some amazing Mickey magic at the end that I won't spoil. It has great music, great message. It is just an all-around blast and like the perfect way to end a park day.
All right, so our C tier attractions, we had no F tier attractions at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Now, we didn't rank things like the Disney Junior Dance Party or anything like that. That is definitely not in our wheelhouse, and if we would have ranked it, you should have called the police. But the C tier attractions, the Beauty and the Beast musical, Indiana Jones stunt show, Alien Swirling Saucers, Millennium Falcon Smugglers Run, I don't see any problem with those. There might be some that you could argue are Bs. I don't think there are any that you could argue are Fs. I think that's a pretty good C list. Our B tier, the Frozen Sing-Along, Muppet Vision 3D. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy. Actually, I can see why they would be mad if Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy was on the same level as Muppet Vision 3D. Rock and Roller Coaster and Star Tours. The A tier, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, Toy Story Mania, Slinky Dog Dash, and controversially, Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, because it just doesn't work enough. And we only had one S tier attraction at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and that was the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. What did we have? Did we have 3 or 4 S tier attractions at Animal Kingdom?
Oh, that's a good question.
I
It might
was
have been
keeping
4.
that tab open on my computer for so long, and then I finally closed it. I know we had Expedition Everest, and I think Kilimanjaro Safari and
Yeah.
Lion King.
Yeah, so maybe it was 3.
I think it was 3. So Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, the lone S tier. Maz, thank you so much. We always get in these much longer conversations than I anticipate. So tell your mother that I am sorry. And,
She'll be fine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been episode 180 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Don't miss a thing we're doing on the channel. by making sure you're subscribed on YouTube to Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We will be back next Thursday with another brand new conversation. Until then, have a great week.